Aloha, welcome to Talk Story. I'm your host, Matthew Salanoa, and this is Talk Story, where I tell a story of some kind. Today's story is about how I found my dream of filmmaking and how it really gave me a course through which I had many adventures and made friends, lost friends, all the sort. And it all started when I was 13 years old and I discovered the movie Blade 2. I was insomniac. I could not sleep for the life of me. And all of a sudden, which is not a normal problem for me, usually I sleep like a rock at the time of 13 years old. But for some reason, there was just a period of weeks I was just really struggling to sleep. If I did get sleep, I would wake up very quickly. And then one night, I wake up, and sometimes what helps me sleep is leaving the TV on. And then this movie Blade 2 was playing. And I grew up loving blockbuster movies. Although I'm a director and all this, and I've studied film, my original love was, I think, what most people experience is blockbuster movies. You want to see the next action movie that comes out and all that good stuff, or the next Adam Sandler comedy, Jim Carrey, whatever. I was just a normal guy. But then all of a sudden, although I definitely grew up a fan of superheroes for sure as a kid, but all of a sudden I'm having these weeks of not being able to sleep. And one night I wake up in the middle of the night after only getting a couple hours, and Blade 2 is playing. And this movie, if you don't know the movie Blade 2, it's about a man played by Wesley Snipes called Blade, who's half vampire, half human, and he runs around hunting vampires. Now, when I saw this movie in the middle of the night, the lighting was so beautiful. I thought the movie looked like a painting. Blade was jumping and leaping and doing these impossible flips, and the camera would move with him. And it looked kind of like a video game, and kind of like what I didn't even know yet. It looked like an anime, and at the same time, it had this sort of painting like beauty. I didn't even know what I was talking about or thinking, but that's what it looked like to me. I thought, this looks like an anime video game that's also a painting all at the same time. So in addition to enjoying the action and thinking it was a very good movie, learning about this Blade character who hates vampires and seems to have a little bit of self-hatred because he himself is a vampire, by the end of the movie, spoiler alert, he falls in love with a vampire woman, but the villain kills her. And so after defeating the villain of the movie, the vampire woman he falls in love with decides she doesn't want to die. Well, the villain of the movie is a zombie vampire, so it's an aberration of normal vampires. So if the zombie vampire bites you, even if you're already a vampire, you'll turn into a zombie vampire. And her last request is, I don't want to die like that. I want to die as myself. And then he carries her out into the sunset, and it's just this. The music swells. The music, I would later learn, is composed by composer Marco Beltrami, who also did the Hellboy score. The music swells. She and Blade embrace each other for the last time, and then she dissolves into dust. And it was just so arresting and beautiful to me. What I was stunned by was, I grew up on blockbuster movies. I grew up on action movies. And I'd never seen an action movie that looked like this. This is also the rise of, at this time, it's the rise of Michael Bay. He had made a name for himself with the Bad Boys franchise, so I'd definitely been watching his movies up to that point. Transformers did not come out yet, but that Michael Bay slash Tony Scott, Enemy of the State, these movies, they did have good cinematography and looked nice, but on the whole they looked very similar. A lot of daytime footage, and when there were stunt shots, sometimes they did look very stunty, But here was a movie that was an action movie that was also sort of a superhero movie, so it was totally crossing into my favorite genre. But it was also so artistically tight. To this day, it still moves me. But this is when I realized I want to know why. Why is this movie so beautiful? And later, this is also the beginning years of DVD. DVD had only come out a few years prior. This is the year 2003. So I'm 13. The year is 2003. That'll tell you a lot about when I'm there. Fast and the Furious had also recently come out. But again, that was another movie that just the lighting's a little bit more natural. There's not as many stylized movies. We did have The Matrix. The Matrix was hugely stylized. And it was also technically a blockbuster movie. So that movie had also broken open my mind. But that movie broke open my mind to think about the world around me and to consider the notion of philosophy in my life. Even though, again, I didn't really know what that meant. But because my mind was just a little bit more open, thanks to The Matrix, when I saw Blade 2, it was just like, I think this is something I want to do. I don't know. Prior to seeing Blade 2 and getting inspired, I had already felt that I wanted something to do with the arts. I grew up sketching, drawing a lot, and my uncle tells me how he still has a lot of my drawings, which I'm scared to look at if I ever see him. But, that same year I had already tried my hand at acting. I thought I wanted to be an actor. I thought I want to do something with this performance arts or visual arts. I don't exactly know what. So I tried acting in a play. And what's interesting is that I remember it was a Charlie Brown play, and I was cast as Linus. And I remember thinking, I'm not Linus, I'm Charlie Brown. And there was a lot of things that the director did that I myself didn't voice any concerns, but I knew I had a completely different attitude about how I felt things should be done. But the problem was I literally didn't know how things should be done. So I couldn't even make a suggestion because I'd never done this before. Most of us who were doing this play had never acted before either. But I noticed that the actor who was cast to play Charlie Brown was very clearly an adorable kid. And of course, yeah, he's adorable. He does have more charisma than me. But that was, in my head, my first criticism of this choice. Charlie Brown does not have charisma. That's his whole point, is that he is this very worn down kid who always feels like the weight of the world's on his shoulder, and he just wants to know why. And that's what I felt I was. And so playing Linus, I thought this was kind of odd. I thought I'm too tall. Linus is short. Again, the kid who was cast as Charlie Brown was short. So it was just kind of like, I totally felt like this should be flipped. And, I didn't feel like I had the personality of Linus at all. And I wasn't really like Charlie Brown anyway. I was already trying my hand at humor that was offending people back then. But yeah, so this I had already had a little experience trying to do theater, and we did 3 performances. At the end, although people cheered and it was nice, I didn't feel good about it. I felt, not that we had done a bad job, I just felt like this wasn't quite for me. And I didn't know what was for me until I watched Blade 2, and I felt there's something, I don't have the words for it yet, that I want. And this movie is beckoning to me to find out what that is. And so when I got the DVD for Blade 2 and I watched the movie all the way through, I was like, God, it's still amazing. Oh my God. And then there was a commentary. What's a commentary? I had watched the commentary for The Matrix, and it was fine, but it wasn't, the commentary was not from the directors / writers, the then Wachowski brothers, now just Wachowskis. They did have interviews where they talked about their influences, but they didn't actually do a commentary. They decided to let the crew have the commentary, which I thought was a very, very interesting choice. But so when it came to Blade 2, I had this itch, this itch that was already there. Like, why did the filmmakers do this? So when I click on the director and producer commentary featuring Guillermo del Toro and Peter Frankfurt, it starts off with all these jokes. Guillermo del Toro has the same coarse humor as I do, and he's totally honest and brutally honest about the flaws with the movie. Like, literally, there's some CGI action in the movie where he's like, now most of this CGI I think is good, but look at this fucking scene. Look at this shot, this fucking shot in this movie. This fucking ugly. Why is this in the movie? You know what I mean? So he's just blatantly complaining about his own movie, about shots that he had to keep in because it completes the scene. But just like, just the blatant honesty about the experience of making the movie. But he then went on to discuss how he was inspired by painting. He was a big art student as a kid. He loved art, and he also loved monsters and stories, and he loved to read, and all of these things that he loved became a part of his passion of originally being in special effects in television shows in Mexico. But he had already been directing his own little short films on Super 8 when he was a little kid. So the bug to direct was there, but his pathway into filmmaking was special effects. And then by the time he decided it was time for him to make his own movie, he's decided to sell his own van to make his first picture. And Kronos, it is a good little movie if you want to check that out. A little bit slow. It's a bit of a slow burn movie, but it's still a good movie. You see all the seeds of what makes Del Toro in that film. But his passion for making that movie was so clear, and that was the call. I went right back to remembering my criticisms of the play, which, the director was probably right, who knows, but it just made me think, oh, I think that's what I want to do. And so I watched that commentary over and over again. I watched all the special features over and over again. I had already absorbed the special features of The Matrix, and I had a Terminator 2 Ultimate Edition DVD. These 3 DVDs, The Matrix, Terminator 2, and Blade 2, these were my first DVDs ever. Okay, DVDs were relatively new, and they finally were becoming affordable. I hope so. My parents bought them, and my aunt bought them for me. But these were my first 3 DVDs, and what would be the beginning of a huge collection. But I would just watch those features constantly, and I absorbed every bit of information of what people did, what were the different jobs, why the director did what he did. When James Cameron made the horrific nuclear bomb sequence in Los Angeles for Terminator 2, that was him warning society of, like, look, this is the horror that you would unleash upon people. And he's trying to show it in America to remind Americans, look, we should not be trying to do this to other people. And so, the warnings are there, a conscious warning to the world. Or on the other side, when it comes to Blade 2, this outward love for art. And even though it's technically an action movie, every inch of that movie, every little pixel of that frame, or technically it was shot on film, so every little morsel of that film was artistically approached, and like I said, I grew up with movies where a lot of times when there's a stunt, you can tell that it's the stunt guy shot it, because you just see this random, weird, awkward shot where, yes, I can tell a stunning stunt has occurred, but it really stands out against the rest of the footage as not really looking like the rest of the movie. There was a lot of that back then. And I would learn from John McTiernan's Predator commentary how, when he first came to direct Predator. I think it was his first action movie. And literally, the Hollywood attitude was, oh, you direct the talky bits, and we stunt people direct the stunty bits. And and then he ends up being like, no, I'm gonna reshoot all of this, because this is just because you do this doesn't mean that I'm not still the director. I want the camera in a certain place for a reason to tell the story. And so I had a lot of great interviews and commentaries. Paul Verhoeven talking about RoboCop, and then eventually my sister worked at Blockbuster, so we were just getting DVDs every week, the free rentals, and I would watch every single commentary, every single special feature. And what I love about that period of the 2000 to 2010 was that was just chock full of DVD features, giving audience members the extra experience to know how movies were made. And as someone who discovered he wanted to be a filmmaker, it was a wonderful resource to really understand the filmmaker's point of view and why things were made the way they were made. And so when I would go on the internet, and the young days of the internet, when all these rumors would come out about how movies were made, such as like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, the studio forcing Sam Raimi to make Venom be in that movie, even though that's not what Sam Raimi wanted to do. And so when you have two superb movies, Spider-Man 1 and 2, and then you have this very heavily flawed Spider-Man 3, you see that the influence of the studio to change what the director wants to do can horrifically affect the experience of that movie. And I really feel like attitudes of the studio, that the whole concept of franchise didn't even really exist yet, even though the Harry Potter franchise was on like number 4 at that point. So it was already being broken by the Harry Potter franchise. But you see directors clashing with studios because of, oh, it's a trilogy, we stop at 3, you always stop at 3, that's the magic number. And it's not the magic number. How many third movies suck, and how many third movies suck because of meddling or inexperienced filmmaking. And every commentary will tell you what exactly happened. And so I had a lot of great sort of research just into how movies were made. And then when I was in the last year of middle school, and then I went into high school. So when I came to high school, before the end of the first semester, there was an assignment in my English class to make a video where you have to form a group, and everyone in the group has to read a page, has to read a couple scenes out of the Romeo and Juliet play. And so actually, I've already discussed this in my Action Movies podcast. I have another podcast where all this love I have of movies, this background that you're getting here, which actually I haven't even described in that podcast, but all the background I have here, it is absolutely what my other podcast is all 100% about. Action movies, storytelling through action. You can go to my homepage, you'll see the playlist for that. I even have clips if you just want to see some little samples. The clips seem to be more popular than the episodes so far, so that's fine. Whatever, if you want to have a taste of that, it's there. But since I already discussed this in the 3rd episode, because I really wanted to hit home that what I have to say about movies, I've not just studied, but I applied it in my own life. And it started in high school. It started with those early little stumbles. And so I'm going to just show you an excerpt from my Action Movies podcast where I talk about the making of my first short film. And after that clip is over, it'll come back to me right now, and I'll continue this story. So here we go. Okay, young directors, this is the part you need to pay attention to. The way Guillermo del Toro shot the scene was in camera editing. What does that mean? That means that he shot every shot in the order it was going to be shown in when it's cut. And this is an old technique that this goes back to the beginning of film. In camera editing doesn't mean you're chopping up the film inside the camera. It means that you're shooting intentionally, knowing that one shot will lead to the next shot, and that you're literally shooting them in the order they're supposed to appear, so that you could literally just shoot exactly the amount of footage you need from beginning to end, and you know that it's going to go to the next shot from beginning to end. And when you print that film and it comes out, you can play it and it will play in order. Cut, it's like pre-cut. You don't even need an editor to cut it for you, practically. Of course, you still need that in today's time, but that's something to think about. In camera editing. This whole podcast is me going over a compendium of what I've learned over the years and what's helped me, gain clients that I had for years. I worked as a video editor, freelance. I had clients for years because I had a strength that from my very first short film and leading into other projects I made in high school, I had a natural strength for editing, but also just storytelling. And I want to stress that storytelling is what's going to define you amongst every other filmmaker. I have been a student of film since I was 13 years old. I discovered I wanted to make movies at that age. And luckily, when I entered the 9th grade, there was a class project that actually required a video to be done. It was everyone had to make a team. We had to make a little group. It was a group project, and one person could be the leader and make the video how they wanted. So because I'd already sort of found my love for film, I took that opportunity and I led the group, and I ended up making, while it's quite quaint for the adult audience, for the 13, 14-year-olds in the class, what I ended up making was a fairly cinematic experience for the class. And it was the first time I'd made a video, but not only the first time I'd made a video, it was the first time I'd heard people kind of sigh and go, oh my God, it looks like a real movie. And granted, no, it doesn't really look like a real movie, but I am making certain choices in that short film that was just supposed to be a simple class project where people just read a scene from Romeo and Juliet. It's supposed to be a confidence building project for, because it was a literature class, it's supposed to be a confidence building project for you to both read the material but be comfortable speaking in front of others. Like my teacher, Miss Reed, she was just really a brilliant teacher. So why is in-camera editing important? Because this is how I approached my first short film. That Romeo and Juliet scene that I talked about, I couldn't believe what Del Toro said, is that when I was 13 years old, I don't think I even had a computer yet. I'm not sure, but it definitely wasn't a computer that had an editing program. I'd never touched an editing program before. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. But all of a sudden, this notion of in-camera editing, meaning you can just shoot each shot in order. So if you visualize your shots and know what shot leads to the next, that essentially you don't even have to edit. You could just shoot something in order. And I did do tape-to-tape editing, recording things on TV and putting scenes where I want them. I did a little bit of that. But in no way did I know how to edit a movie, or let alone shoot one. But the whole notion that is, if you just think of your shots ahead of time and then shoot them in order, you don't even have to edit, because you're essentially designing the shot to end where the next shot starts, so that when the viewer watches it, they're having a fluid experience. And with that in mind, that made filmmaking possible for me. I was like, I can take a video camera and come up with the visual, how I'm going to shoot it, and shoot in order. And when it comes out, people can just watch it like a Pop-Tart, like presto, instant movie. And that sat in my gut for not even a whole year, like maybe 8 months before I went to high school. And then this opportunity came. And I think it was about a year, actually, by the time I actually did it. But then this opportunity came. Hey, class, we're going to do a video project. And Miss Reed shows previous examples. Look, all you have to do is stand there with a book in your hand and read the scene. And she's not saying this, but I realize this is a confidence building exercise. She did a lot of things like that, like making us cheer every time someone did speak in front of the class as a confidence building exercise, which is, it's a good life skill to have, to be able to speak in front of people and to speak clearly. And that's part of what this video project was. It was like, you know, rather than making everyone read a scene in front of everybody, make them do it on video. And then again, video is a good skill to have in this modern age, that video is becoming accessible to regular people on a scale hitherto unheard of. And so when this opportunity happens, like, and I had my group, and I was like, I have an idea of how to do this. Can I just be in charge? And everyone just said, yeah. No one cared. It's homework, right? And so, you know, and I did my homework, where it's like I came up with the shots. In this case, I didn't know storyboarding, so I didn't, you know, I didn't storyboard, but I just visualized it. I visualized in my head, how do I want this to look? How do I want this to move? What do I want the music choices to be? Because by this point, I have started listening to movie scores. It all started with The Matrix, which will be the next video. It all started with The Matrix. You know, I loved that score, and then I listened to the Blade 2 score. I loved the Terminator 3 score, even though I didn't like the movie. I loved the score. And so I was just visualizing what my shots would be. And what we had was the end of the play, the very last scenes of the play, where Romeo goes to visit Juliet. And although it's not in the movie, in the play, Prince, not Prince, the character who's supposed to marry Juliet, which is what makes her fake kill herself, he's actually there mourning her. And Romeo shows up, and immediately the guy she was supposed to marry, not knowing she's already married to Romeo, tries to go, oh, you're a criminal, you're exiled, I'm going to fight you to make sure that you don't desecrate this scene of my beloved. And Romeo's like, no, she's my beloved, get out of here. And then they fight to the death. And so, and then it followed up by him taking the poison and then dying as she wakes up. And so, not that I did it super well, but every single shot was planned ahead of time, and I knew where the cuts were going to be. So this was my first opportunity to do it. And I did my homework we were going to do it, we couldn't do it at my house. So I was like, who's willing to let us shoot at your house, and who has a camera? And luckily, one of the classmates in my team, she had just moved in, or they were painting her house or something, so it was kind of looking very nice and clean right now. And she had her father's video camera, which was a videotape. Actually, it was a mini tape, but it was still using like the videotape camcorder. So she had everything, and all I had to do, and I was like, can I use it? Sure, you know? And so the night before we shot, I came in to look at the place just so I knew where I was going to be shooting, and I could really, now I'm going to actually visualize in the real place it's going to be. And I got to look at the camera and I could test it real quick. Like, how does it shoot? How does it record? Is there a delay? Because I know when I did my tape-to-tape recordings from what I videotaped off of TV, I knew that there was always that little delay, and it had the exact same time delay as the regular VHS tape. So I could factor that into my plan. And so what I did was I visualized every shot, how it began, what music was going to be under that scene, and I would literally time when I cut to the music so that the music would continue into the next shot. And when we did that, it was successful. For the most parts, the music cuts were very smooth. There was a couple times where it was off because my timing was off. But yeah, for the most part, and I decided to shoot it so that you never actually saw the book in their hands. There was one shot where it was unavoidable. I forget what happened, but you see the book in her hand. But for the most part, I was just like, look, I know this is not going to be an Oscar-winning movie, but I don't want to see that freaking book in your hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot around the book, and all you got to do is read it. And then people will hopefully feel like they're watching a movie when they watch this. And the beautiful thing is, when it played, here's the funny story behind it. I knew I had something even though I didn't look at it again. But when my classmate came in, she was like, I watched it with my dad, we liked it. I was like, oh, that's a good sign. You know what I mean? The fact that you're in it, and I know I'd be self-conscious if I was on camera. The fact that you're in it and you like it, good sign. And so I went to my teacher and I said, hey, can we play this last? And she said, sure. And I know she was trying to be coy, but she ended up playing it first. And I think she thought I was asking for it to be played last because I was insecure. But actually, it was because I was excited. I thought this should be the last one to play because this is going to be an event. If it goes well, if it goes the way I planned it, this is going to be an event. And you know what? It played first and right from the start. It looks like a real movie. That was all I needed to hear. You know what I mean? It looks like a real movie. Now, again, if you watch this Romeo and Juliet video, you're going to be like, okay, that looks like crap. But consider that every video afterward was just the camera on a tripod and people going, and I don't like you, Tybalt, but I'm doing all this camera work and it's very dark and it does kind of look cinematic and you have this dramatic music underneath everything. And then there's sound effects and people are running and hiding and the camera's moving with them and doing things. And, you know, granted, it does look dated and bad, but you can tell, especially the way it ends. I had this vision that the last shot should be Romeo and Juliet laying next to each other, their hands clasped with this particular music. And I'm just going to back up from their hands to see all of them. And the camera will finally pull away back into the darkness behind the wall. And the music will swell, and that's going to be the end of the movie. And when that happened, literally the classroom clapped. And everyone was like, oh no, now they have to show my video. You know what I mean? Like, in every video afterward, yes, da 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 da. One person had some editing. Their uncle was a video guy. But it was still the same thing. Yeah, da 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 da. Juliet Romeo, blah 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 blah. The video's over, you know what I mean? So, you know, that was a testament to me. Like, here I am, 13. Yeah, I think I'm still 13 years old at the time of this video. And I applied what Guillermo del Toro taught me, looking at the visual style, thinking about how the shot began and ended. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that clip. I cannot tell you what an amazing experience it was to have students in my class whisper to each other, it feels like a real movie. You know, it was one of those things that set in stone to me that, hey, I think I want to be a director. Where it became, from the beginning of making that, I think I want to be a director, by the time they were saying, it looks like a real movie. By the time they were saying that, I was like, I want to be a director. This is my destiny. And I had felt it when I heard that commentary. And it just rang true to me with, again, thinking about that play that I did where I internally disagreed with the director's choices. And truth be told, every crew has that. Every, you know, all the experiences I've had since making that short, every crew has that where they disagree with the director. And that's just how it goes. But actually, I wanted to get into that a bit. But also, I want to get into sort of part of why I wanted to make this video today. I was watching a podcast from Danny Jones. I've just started watching a few of his episodes. It's a very interesting podcast. On this particular episode that I was watching today, they talk about precognitive dreams. If you don't know what that means, precognitive meaning you're sensing something that's happening in the future and it's appearing in your dream. But they also discuss how this also happens in our waking life all the time, and we call it synchronicity when we don't exactly fully understand why things seem to line up in our life. But I want to say that feeling the calling to make movies was such a like it was a truly religious feeling, like I could not describe in any other way. That I truly felt like I had a calling. This I had been summoned, and not only that, my heart wanted what I was summoned to do. And so to have this opportunity just appear to make this project, and again, let me reiterate, I did not have to make it that way. It was just supposed to be a camera sitting still with a bunch of us just reading from the book. That's it. That was all we were asked to do. I took it the next level because I wanted to know for sure, because I'm a kind of a evidence-based guy. I don't just believe something because someone says it, or because if if the evidence adds up, then I look at the evidence. That's just how I am. It makes me happier when I know for sure that something is true, rather than just taking someone's word for it. So this was my destiny. I felt the call of destiny. And the cool thing is, the last assignment for this class, by the time the time my ninth grade year ended, the last assignment was to figure out what your dream job is, or something you would like to do, and then go get experience on that, in that area. Go to the place, meet people, and get the experience of seeing how it works. And so, since I was in San Francisco, there's no movie studios, and I can't afford to go to Los Angeles at this time. We were just a working class family. My family, we could barely afford the bread and eggs that we had, if we had eggs. Okay, so it was, we made just enough that I couldn't have a free lunch at school, but not enough for me to have anything more than peanut butter and jelly, which I'm still grateful for. But anyway, so considering that I couldn't go to LA, I asked, well, I did a little bit of research, and there's this school in San Francisco, where I'm born and raised. 415, what up? There's a school called Academy of Art University where the what it says on the website is that we train people to become professional filmmakers, and we have movie sets and all this stuff. And my teacher accepted that as an alternative, considering that I want to make movies, but LA is a really long way away. And this is where this whole precog thing becomes important, because in the podcasts they talk about how young children can kind of see the future. That from time to time these instances happen, even in waking life, where kids can kind of predict something that's about to happen, and it happens. And so I had a lot of that deja vu feeling, like I'd been places before, I'd experienced, and these experiences would keep going through college, where I feel like I'm experiencing something before it happens, or as I'm experiencing something, I feel like I can say the words that are about to come out of someone else's mouth. Like I know what's going to happen. But the first and biggest experience, or at least maybe not the first, but certainly the biggest experience of this, was walking through the halls of Academy of Art University for the first time. And as soon as I walked in, I knew I was going to go there for college. And some part of me felt like this is my destiny. It's true. I'm going to be a great filmmaker someday, and this is where I'm going to learn what I need to learn to become that great filmmaker. And I got the whole tour. I got to see some of the sets that are inside the school, and I just remember walking around just being stunned at what opportunities were waiting for me in the future. But here's the thing, okay? This was ninth grade. I still had 3 more years of high school to go. So basically, by the time I hit 12th grade, the last year of high school, reality has set in. Academy of Art University costs millions of dollars to attend. Not thousands, but millions. So, with that in mind, I decided, well, I have a pretty good GPA, so I'll just apply to San Francisco State University. There's a bunch of universities in the area, even in Oakland. I can take public transportation. There's a lot of opportunity still to get a decent film education without having to go to Academy of Art University. And here's the crazy thing that happened. I had let go of Academy of Art as an option by the time I was a 12th grader. It just was not realistic. And I knew even if I got a job, I wouldn't have the time to go to school because I would have a job. And so for months, I applied to 5 different schools, and every single school, even though I was a 3.6 to 3.8 GPA, which is very high, that's like pretty close to 4. 4 is all you need to be considered like best of the best. I was very high GPA. I'm mixed race. You know what I mean? Supposedly, if you are of the minority, these schools are looking for you. I'm Hawaiian. I mean, I'm as minority as it gets because everyone else is Latin and black and Asian. You know what I mean? But every single school rejected me. And it was literally like the last couple months of high school where I was like, I don't know where I'm going to college. I guess I can go to City College. They will literally take anyone. And that's what I was just preparing to do. Like, I'll just have to get a regular job and go to City College, and that's fine. Maybe I can just go to LA, who knows? And actually, all of a sudden, in the last couple months of school, this opportunity came up where Academy of Art University was offering scholarships to my school. My school. Not just any high school. I had already tried to transfer from my high school to the High School of the Arts, which is a very hoity-toity art school somewhere very far away, still in San Francisco, but like 30 minutes away from me. I tried going there because I thought that would be a more direct pathway, and I was not good enough for them. So here I am thinking, why would you come here? Why wouldn't you go to the hoity-toity art school? And actually, they were considering 6 different applicants, and I was just a 7th. I was a tack on. I was, oh, hey, you like this school, right? Hey, they're here. You might as well just apply. And so out of the 6 people, out of 5 people, I was number 6. Out of 5 people given the opportunity, I was the last guy just tacked on at the very end. I submitted my application, and out of all of them, I was the one who got the scholarship. It was crazy. And I would actually later find out that the other 5 students never even applied. They didn't even apply. So it was as if destiny reached right back out for me. And it made me think of that line from The Matrix that Morpheus says to Neo when he's rescued him from being captured by the agents. And some kind of revelation has occurred that Neo is capable of far more than he ever thought he was. And Morpheus tells him, Neo's like, you knew, and I think I know. I don't know. There's kind of a reaction in his face. And Morpheus says, I know. Something you have to come to understand is there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. And it was as if all of it was really true, that I knew my destiny. I knew I was going to go to this school. And yet I could not possibly have figured out how that would occur. But what I ended up with was a full ride presidential scholarship, meaning the president herself was giving this gift to me. And so I got to attend Academy of Art without paying those millions of dollars, and all I had to pay for was course fees and for the books, which was like nothing. Like nothing. The course fees were a couple $100 here and there. Some classes didn't even cost that much. And mostly the most expensive part was just the books. And so at that point, I was already beginning to get paid by, maybe I wasn't paid yet, but I was already in the position where teachers were wanting to hire me to do video work for them. And so I just kept doing video work for my high school to pay for those courses and fees. And I got to attend Academy of Art on the scholarship, and I was able to just be a fully committed student to the very thing that I found as my dream. And this was amazing. This was a wonderful, wonderful thing, and it was validating. This feeling that I had 3 years prior, that then by the time the opportunity came, I had become another person, just certain that this was just a fantasy, that I was not really going to achieve anything. And then a miracle happened. And I don't think I gave enough gratitude to the president. I did bring her flowers once and promise her in my note to her, because I didn't get to see her directly, but I did bring her flowers once and promise her that I will get you back for this investment. You invested in me, and I will show you that this investment was what's the word? I'm trying to find the right wording. And my note was, each one of these flowers is for the years that I never brought you flowers, and I'm going to prove to you that your investment in me was worth it. And so unfortunately, I did not make it into the industry, but I did almost have the opportunity to. And that's a story for another time. But I have to say, my years studying at Academy of Art University, although I don't miss everything, I think I absolutely had the best classes. All of my teachers, or most of them, were working industry professionals. And I got to be on a lot of film shoots. I got to wear a lot of different hats. And I really got to learn so much that I never could have learned without going there. So I never stopped being a student outside of the classroom, but everything I learned I put into my work. And my work, by the end of my last year at Academy of Art University, did get me the opportunity to talk with a man from Universal Studios about a job. And again, that is the story for another podcast. I hope you enjoyed this so far. I've had numerous incidences in my life where I felt that things would or could happen, and they did. And so I do absolutely believe in destiny, or at least I used to. I used to, and especially in that time, believe in destiny and believe that things were coming for me that were good. But also I could detect the bad things coming too. It was a two-way street. So I just wanted to share that with you. If you yourself have had experiences of precognition, thinking that something was meant for you and then it did happen, I'd love to hear your story in the comments, or make your own video. Let me know. Or give me a little response to Talk's story. I'd love to see your video. But that's what I got to say for today. I'm very grateful for my experiences at Academy of Art University and to have found my dream. So anyway, I have more stories for another podcast. I just wanted to get this little one out because this podcast from Danny Jones, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. This podcast, it really hit me there because that's a situation where, without question, I had a precognitive experience in the waking life, not in a dream, but while I was awake. I knew it, a sort of a pre-deja vu. So these things are real. Miracles do happen, but I do think you also have to believe in them. So that's what I got to say for today. I hope you enjoyed this little tidbit, just a little mini story, how I found my dream, and there'll be more stories to come. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you next time. Mahalo and aloha.